Nuuspod, onbevange, onbegrens, onbevooroordeel.
Goeiedag, baie welkom by Nuuspod. Ek het vandag vir die baie bekende joernalis Bateman hier by my. En die van julle wat nou al gehoor het in die nuus, hy is by Afriforum en hy is deesdae daar by hulle private vervolgingseenheid. En ek gaan nou met Barry gesels wat 'n mens wil weet, hoe skuif 'n bekende joernalis soos Barry na 'n organisasie toe waar hy nou 'n woordvoerder gaan wees. Barry, good day, welcome to Nuuspod.
Good afternoon, Izak. Thank you for having me.
Barry, that's a big shift. I mean, you are very well known throughout South Africa as a journalist.
It is a bit of a change, but it's something I have been looking at for quite some time now, not necessarily to Afriforum. It was just fortuitous that I was with Gerrie Nel about a month or so ago that we had the discussion, and I was just joking with him. I said, "You need somebody to do your communications, Gerrie," and he said, "Would you accept an offer?" And I said, "Of course I would." But I've been studying towards my LLB degree for about 5 years through UNISA. COVID and the lockdown has thrown that up in the air, but we'll get there eventually. Mm-hmm. But what I've been looking at is moving into a communication sphere where I could combine my skills and experience of journalism, excuse me, and the understanding of newsrooms, together with the understanding of the law and procedure, and be able to bridge a gap between what's happening in the courts and what's happening in newsrooms. And this role that I've taken on as the communications manager for the private prosecution unit is exactly that. The unit, Gerrie and his whole team, they primarily deal with the courts and legal matters, as the name of the unit suggests. And I'll be able to take my skills and there's a lot happening in the background, Izak, that many people simply don't know about. You hear about the Senzo Miyiwa cases and the various other high profile matters, but there is so much work going on in the background. And I want to highlight that work and bring it to the fore in a manner that is easily picked up by our newsrooms, and exposing the continued injustices that are happening in our criminal justice system.
A journalist with your experience, we all know the moment you move out of journalism into specifically a field like that, it sort of closes the gate.
I absolutely considered all of that. People joke when journalists move over to PR that they've gone to the dark side, or into communications, you've left the field. And I'm well aware of that. I believe that I have peaked in my journalism career. I've worked in the print industry, I've moved on to radio, and then the last 2 years I've been in television broadcasting for ENCA. I'm a senior journalist. I believe I've accomplished quite a lot in the last 2 decades. I am ready now to move on to a different sphere of my career. And again, it's taking in that experience as a journalist, together with what I know about the courts, studying towards the LLB and moving into communication. So it was a heavy decision, a big decision. I didn't do it lightly. I took into, I spoke to my wife long hours about it as well, because you got to, something like this, you got to get the whole family involved. It's a big life-changing decision. And you're absolutely right. Going back, many journalists go, or communications people go back to the sphere. But I didn't take it lightly, and I'm very excited about the next step.
I think it is unfair, but it is a fact that Afriforum is being pictured as in some media, South African media, even as right-wing, and at the least very conservative, which is also a factor to take into account when you move from something like journalism into what you are doing at the moment. Some thoughts on that?
I had a sit down with Gerrie Nel when we were discussing the offer, and you're right, there are perceptions about Afriforum, the organization, but I think we need to look at how Gerrie Nel has established the private prosecutions unit, and it's at arm's length from Afriforum and the solidarity movement as a whole in its independence and its ability to operate independently. That's important because as the NPA would operate within the criminal justice system, it needs to be seen to be independent and impartial. And for a private prosecutions unit, that needs to be perceived and needs to be seen as operating independently and impartial. So just like Gerrie, you won't hear him commenting on the politics of Afriforum, the mother body. He leaves that to Kali Kriel and Ernst Rutz, and you know, that's what they do. So it was that in mind. So I'm very mindful of the perceptions out there, but I think the role I'm taking on is best judged by what work the private prosecution unit has done, and then judge me on the work that I will be doing going forward. Let's look at the cases that the unit takes on. And I think already, if you had to assess the cases that have been taken on by this unit, it would dispel any suggestion that there is a political bent for the unit itself.
I hear you when you say that the unit is at arm's length from the bigger organization, but they are still operating under the same sort of blanket. Won't that, and I know that a lot of Gerrie's work come from Afriforum.
No, let me correct you there. There's no instruction that comes from Afriforum or Solidarity on what work Gerrie will take on. Absolutely not. Gerrie makes the decision entirely on his own as an independent body. Perhaps you misconstruing what the work that Afriforum does in itself when it briefs her to speak, for example, and takes on litigation, whereas Gerrie doesn't take on any litigation of that sort. The unit absolutely does not take instruction from Afriforum, the mother body, or Solidarity. The criticism is always going to be there. I mean, the criticism has been that you're joining Afriforum, but I think, again, we got to go back to the work that the private prosecution unit has done, judge the decision based on that work, and then the future work that we're going to be done. I haven't actually officially started. I'll be joining on tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the first day, Tuesday. And, you know, let's take it from there. Let's see what we get up to.
What is it that make the private prosecuting unit an important institution in South Africa?
You've got to understand perhaps why it was established. And first off, private prosecution is permitted within the ambit of the law. So you've got the Criminal Procedure Act, there's specific sections which allow for it, and it can only come into operation under certain circumstances. Some of the criticism leveled at the unit is that the unit wants to take over the role of the state. Well, that's simply not the case, because it cannot do that by law. What the unit can do is, once the state, having assessed a case that has been opened, makes a decision that it no longer wants to prosecute that case, well, then an interested party can apply for a certificate called a nolle prosecute certificate, which is a certificate to state that the state no longer wants to pursue this matter. It is in those instances that the private prosecution would be able to step in and take a case forward and initiate that private prosecution. There are other instances where the unit can assist, not necessarily with private prosecutions, but applying pressure to the various parties involved in the criminal justice system, such as the police or the NPA, writing letters. We've seen cases where the NPA is simply not proceeding on a particular matter, and due to the pressure brought by Gerrie Nel and his team, that matter eventually gets enrolled. Julius Malema is a case in point there that relates to the assault case on a police officer, as well as the alleged firing of a firearm in a public place. But then we just look at instances. There was a case earlier this week. We can't identify the complainant nor the accused. When I say earlier this week, I meant last week. This relates to an alleged sexual assault. It was a young female advocate. There was a social event evening. This acting judge and a former manager of the legal aid board, he came up behind her and he stuck his hand up her skirt and allegedly sexually assaulted this young woman. She did the right thing. She went and opened up a criminal complaint at the SAPS. She filed a complaint with the Legal Practice Council, as well as the Joburg Bar Council. All three institutions, the National Prosecuting Authority declined to initiate a prosecution. The LPC and the Bar Council turned a blind eye until Gerrie Nel got involved and started sending letters to the National Prosecuting Authority, making it quite clear that on the evidence that is presented here, the statement, the docket, there is absolutely no reason why this matter shouldn't proceed. It has now happened that this accused has appeared in court on a charge of sexual assault, And now the Legal Practice Council wants to take the matter up on an internal disciplinary hearing. So that just gives you an idea of the work that's happening. It doesn't necessarily mean that we go to court, but there's a lot of stuff happening addressing selective prosecution, questionable prosecutions. It is in there that a unit like this would be able to step in. It has some of the best skills that is brought from the NPA. Some people don't know this, but Gerrie Nel didn't come alone. He came with the entire unit, or his group of people that supported him during the prosecution of Jackie Salibi, and went through the Oscar Pistorius trial and many other trials. That same mindset and methodology, which is a prosecutor-led investigation, which ultimately leads to successful prosecutions in court. That whole unit and methodology is what's being done now in the Afriforum Private Prosecution Unit. So I think it is very important, and it comes down to has to be cooperation between the unit and the state authorities for it to be a success. So it's not just acting in isolation, it does its own work, but absolutely it's for the benefit of society in the end.
Barry Bateman, the new media spokesperson for the private prosecution unit of Afriforum. Thank you very much for having talked to us, Barry.
Baie dankie, Izak. Is net 'n plesier.
Nuuspod. Onbevange, onbegrens, onbevooroordeeld.